It was supposed to be just a simple night out, a little shisha, some laughs, nothing more. But one glance, one conversation, one choice, changed everything. Tonight, I'm sharing the story of a secret connection that no one saw coming, and the consequences that lingered long after the smoke cleared. Stay with me, because this is a story you won't forget. I didn't know that night would divide my life into a before and an after. At the time, it felt harmless, almost boring in its familiarity. Just another evening where the city exhaled after a long day, where men pretended they weren't tired and women pretended they weren't lonely, all of us hiding behind smoke and laughter. It was just a shisha outing. Nothing more, or so I told myself. I arrived late, as usual. That has always been my curse, showing up when things have already begun to loosen, when secrets are already halfway out of their cages. The lounge was dim, washed in amber light that made everyone look better than they were. The kind of place where time softened its grip, where minutes blurred into music and smoke rings floated like unfinished thoughts. I won't name the place. Names have a way of anchoring memories, and I've spent years trying to keep this one from sinking too deep. The air was thick with flavored smoke, apple, mint, something sweeter I couldn't place. It clung to my clothes, my hair, my lungs. The music was low, a slow rhythm that didn't demand attention but insisted on presence. Conversations overlapped like waves, laughter rising and falling without warning. I spotted my friends in the corner. Familiar faces. Comfortable faces. The kind you don't need to impress anymore. We nodded, exchanged handshakes, the usual half hugs that men give when they want to appear close without admitting it. Someone pushed a hose toward me. I took it without thinking. The first drag was smooth. Too smooth. It settled into me, easing something I hadn't realized was tense. That's when I saw her. She wasn't loud. She wasn't trying. She didn't need to. She sat 2 tables away, angled slightly away from the group she was with, as though she was present but not fully committed to being there. Her laughter came late, a second after everyone else's, like she was catching up to a joke she'd already heard somewhere else. I noticed her hands first. Long fingers, slow movements. She held her phone like it was a fragile thing, something that could crack if squeezed too hard. No ring that I could see. Not that it mattered, or maybe it mattered more than I was willing to admit. I looked away. I always do at first. There's a moment when attraction announces itself quietly, politely, as if asking permission. If you ignore it long enough, it usually leaves. That night, it didn't. She's been staring at you, one of my friends said casually, as if commenting on the weather. I scoffed. You see things when you're bored. He shrugged. Maybe. Or maybe she's bored too. I didn't respond. I took another drag, exhaled slowly, watched the smoke dissolve into the dim lights above. I told myself I was imagining it. That this was nothing. That I'd been alone too long, that my mind was filling gaps it shouldn't. But when I looked again, our eyes met. There was no jolt, no cinematic pause, just a quiet recognition, the kind that doesn't rush you but doesn't let you escape either. She didn't look away immediately. Neither did I. It lasted a second longer than it should have. Then she smiled, not wide, not inviting. Just enough to acknowledge the moment before returning to her conversation. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. Time passed in pieces after that. Someone ordered another round of drinks. The hose changed hands. The music shifted slightly, as if leaning into the night. Conversations grew softer, more personal. The city outside faded into irrelevance. I caught glimpses of her between moments. The way she leaned in when someone spoke to her. The way her eyes wandered when she thought no one was watching. There was a restlessness about her that I recognized too well. The kind that comes from being somewhere you've outgrown but not yet escaped. Eventually, she stood and walked toward the restroom. As she passed our table, she slowed, just enough to be deliberate. "Excuse me," she said. Her voice was calm, warm, not rehearsed. I shifted my chair slightly to give her space. Our eyes met again, closer this time. I noticed the faint scent of her perfume beneath the smoke, something clean, understated. Something that didn't belong in a place like this. "No problem," I replied. That was it. 2 words. Nothing worth remembering. yet my heart behaved like I'd said something else entirely. When she returned, she didn't go back to her table. Instead, she paused near ours, hesitating just long enough to make it look accidental. "Is this seat taken?" she asked, gesturing to the empty chair beside me. It wasn't, but it had never been available either. "No," I said. "Go ahead." She sat, close enough that I could feel the warmth of her arm without touching it. Close enough that every movement mattered. We didn't introduce ourselves. Not immediately. We spoke about trivial things, how crowded the place was, how the city never seemed to sleep anymore, how Shisha tasted better at night. Safe topics. Neutral ground. But beneath every sentence was something unspoken, humming quietly between us. I learned small things first. She liked listening more than talking. She smiled with her eyes before her mouth caught up. She had a habit of tucking her hair behind her ear when she was nervous, though she'd never admit to being nervous at all. At some point, someone asked if she wanted a drink. She declined politely. "I'm driving," she said. That should have been my cue to step back. Responsibility has a way of announcing itself in moments like that. Instead, I nodded and admired the discipline in her choice. "What about you?" she asked me. "You always this quiet." "Only when I'm thinking too much," I said. "And what are you thinking about now?" I hesitated. Honesty hovered on my tongue, dangerous and tempting. "Whether this night will be remembered," I said instead. She laughed softly. "Most nights aren't. Summer," I replied. She studied me for a moment, as if weighing something invisible. Then she leaned back slightly, crossing her legs with an ease that suggested she knew exactly what she was doing, or maybe she didn't, and that made it worse. "You talk like someone who's already made up his mind," she said. "About what?" "About staying." I didn't answer, because she was right. We talked for a long time after that. Or maybe it only felt long because time had begun to behave differently around us. She never mentioned her husband. Not once. And I never asked. Some questions are avoided not out of politeness, but out of mutual survival. What I knew, what I sensed, was enough. She spoke about work in vague terms. About responsibilities that felt heavier than they should. About feeling invisible in rooms where she was expected to shine. I listened without interrupting, without trying to fix anything. I've learned that sometimes, listening is the most dangerous thing you can offer someone. At one point, our knees brushed under the table. Neither of us moved away. That touch, so small, so easily dismissed, sent a quiet tremor through me. Not desire alone, but recognition. The kind that says, you are not alone in this feeling, whatever it is. The night thinned around us. People left. Chairs scraped. The staff began their subtle rituals of closing. Still, we remained. Eventually, she checked her phone. Her expression shifted, not fear, not guilt. Just awareness. "I should go," she said. I nodded, even though every part of me resisted. "Of course." She stood, hesitated, then leaned closer. Close enough that her words were meant only for me. "Tonight didn't feel accidental," she said quietly. "No." I agreed. It didn't. She straightened, offered a smile that held more questions than answers, and walked away. I watched her leave, watched the door close behind her, watched the smoke thin as if the room itself had exhaled. I told myself that was it. That some moments are meant to exist only once. That mystery is more powerful when left untouched. I was wrong, because as I stepped outside into the cool night air, my phone vibrated. A message. Unknown number. "Did you get home safe?" And just like that, the night refused to end. I stood there longer than I should have, phone in my hand, the screen glowing like a quiet confession. The night air felt colder suddenly, sharper against my skin, as if it knew something had shifted and wanted to mark the moment. Traffic moved past me in indifferent waves, horns blaring, engines humming, life continuing as if nothing extraordinary had just slipped into my pocket. "Did you get home safe?" A simple question. Polite, almost innocent, yet it carried a weight far heavier than its words. It meant she had saved my number. It meant she had thought about me after leaving. It meant the door she could have closed gently had been left ajar on purpose. I didn't reply immediately. That pause, those few seconds, was my last honest attempt at restraint. I told myself I was being cautious. That silence would cool whatever spark had flared between us. That answering too quickly would reveal something I wasn't ready to admit. But the truth was simpler. I was afraid of how much I wanted to answer. When I finally typed back, my fingers felt steadier than my thoughts. Just got in. Hope you did too. Neutral. Safe. A response that pretended balance where there was none. 3 dots appeared almost instantly. I did. Thank you. That should have been the end of it. 2 adults exchanging courtesy, closing the night with dignity. I slipped the phone into my pocket and began the walk to my car, repeating a quiet mantra, this is where it stops. It didn't. The days that followed were ordinary in every visible way. I went to work. I answered emails. I laughed at jokes I barely heard. On the surface, nothing had changed. Beneath it, something restless paced back and forth inside me, replaying fragments of a night that refused to settle into memory. I wondered about her more than I cared to admit. What her mornings looked like. Whether she woke early or lingered in bed. Whether she drank coffee or tea. Whether she thought about me with the same reluctant curiosity. I didn't text her. Not the next day. Not the one after that. Silence can feel powerful when you're trying to convince yourself you're in control. On the 3rd evening, my phone buzzed while I was stuck in traffic. You survived Monday, the message read. That alone deserves recognition. I laughed out loud, surprising myself. The tension I'd been carrying loosened its grip just a little. Barely, I replied. I suspect Monday enjoys watching people suffer. It does, she wrote back. I've always said it has a personality disorder. That was how it began, not with declarations or promises, but with humor. With small observations shared between 2 people who pretended they weren't circling something dangerous. We texted in short bursts at first. Casual exchanges threaded through our days. Nothing that crossed obvious lines. Nothing that couldn't be explained away if discovered, though neither of us said that part out loud. I never asked about her home life. Not directly. I sensed its shape from the edges of her words. The way she avoided evenings. The way she preferred mornings or late nights for conversation. The way she sometimes went quiet for hours, then returned as if nothing had happened. And she never asked about my past. Not the relationships that hadn't worked. Not the reasons I'd grown comfortable with solitude. Some subjects are avoided because they reveal too much too soon. Instead, we talked about music. About cities we loved or wanted to escape. About moments that had stayed with us longer than expected. She had a way of describing things that made them feel intimate without being personal, like she was letting me see the outline of her life without filling in the details. One night, close to midnight, she sent a voice note. I don't usually do this, she said softly, her voice low and unguarded. But typing feels insufficient tonight. I replayed it twice before responding. Her voice carried something text couldn't, warmth, hesitation, and honesty she hadn't fully approved yet. You sound tired, I said when I replied. I am, she admitted. But not the kind of tired sleep fixes. I understood that kind of exhaustion. The kind that comes from living a life that looks complete from the outside while quietly starving inside. Then maybe you should rest, I suggested. It was the responsible thing to say. Maybe, she replied, or maybe I should talk to someone who listens. That was the first line we crossed. Subtle, almost invisible, but once crossed, it became easier to step over the next. We began meeting again, always by coincidence. The same lounge, once more. Then a different one across town. Never planned too far in advance. Always spontaneous enough to feel unintentional. She never stayed too late. I never asked her to. The first time we sat side by side again, weeks after that initial night, the familiarity startled me. As if our bodies remembered something our minds were still negotiating. You look different, she said, studying me as she took her seat. So do you, I replied. She smiled. Different good or different dangerous? I considered it, both. She laughed, but there was an edge to it. Awareness. Acceptance. We talked more openly that night. Not about us, but about the spaces between things. About expectations placed on people without their consent. About the way love can become routine if left unattended. Still, She didn't mention her husband. And I didn't ask. By then, his absence had become a presence of its own, felt, acknowledged, carefully stepped around. At one point, the table grew quiet. Music filled the space between our words. She leaned back, exhaling smoke slowly, watching it rise. Do you ever wonder, she asked, how many versions of ourselves we abandon just to keep the peace? All the time, I answered. She nodded, eyes distant. Sometimes I miss the woman I was before I learned how to behave. That sentence stayed with me long after the night ended. We didn't touch that evening. Not intentionally, but the tension between us thickened, charged with restraint. It felt almost sacred, the way we honored that invisible boundary while pressing against it from opposite sides. The next time, it slipped. It was raining that night. The kind of rain that soaks without warning, heavy and relentless. She arrived flustered, hair damp, frustration written across her face. Bad night, I asked. She sighed. You have no idea. I handed her a napkin without thinking, watching her dry her hands. The gesture was small, domestic, intimate in a way that startled us both. Thank you, she said quietly. Our fingers brushed. This time, neither of us pretended it was accidental. She didn't pull away, neither did I. The contact lasted only a second longer than necessary, but it was enough. Enough to acknowledge what we'd been denying. I should go, she said almost immediately, standing too quickly. Okay, I replied, though every part of me protested. She paused, then leaned closer, her voice barely above the music. This is getting complicated. Yes, I agreed. It is. She searched my face, as if looking for reassurance or warning. Maybe both. Promise me something, she said. What? That if this ever becomes something we can't control, you'll let me walk away. The request caught me off guard. It was a plea disguised as logic. I promise, I said, though I already suspected it would be the hardest promise I'd ever keep. She nodded, satisfied enough to leave. But promises, I would soon learn, don't protect you from desire. They only delay its consequences. That night, lying alone in my bed, I replayed every moment. Every word, every pause that had meant more than it should. I told myself I was strong enough to maintain distance. That I could enjoy the connection without crossing into something irreversible. I underestimated how fragile restraint becomes when two people are equally lonely. The message came the next evening. Can I see you? Just for a walk. No shisha. No smoke. I stared at the screen for a long time. This wasn't coincidence anymore. This was intention. And I typed back the words that sealed our quiet agreement. Yes. I didn't know then that that walk, innocent as it sounded, would be the moment everything tilted. That once you step out of the shadows and into open air, there's nowhere left to hide. Because some lines aren't crossed in passion. They're crossed in silence, side by side, pretending the ground beneath you isn't already shifting. We didn't choose a dramatic place for that walk. No sweeping waterfront, no quiet park bathed in moonlight. Just a long, ordinary street lined with closed shops, yellow streetlights humming softly above us like tired witnesses. That should have made it safer. Ordinary places lull you into thinking nothing extraordinary can happen there. She arrived a few minutes late. I was leaning against my car when I saw her crossing the street toward me, arms folded tightly around herself, not from the cold but from something heavier. She wore no makeup this time, or very little. Her hair was pulled back carelessly, as though she hadn't expected to be seen closely. That vulnerability hit me harder than any elegance she'd worn before. Hi, she said. Hi. We stood there awkwardly for a moment, two adults pretending this was casual, pretending the weight between us wasn't thick enough to bend light. Walk? I asked. She nodded. We fell into step without thinking about direction. The city made those decisions for us. Cars passed. A bus hissed at a stop nearby. Somewhere, someone laughed too loudly. Life carried on with its usual indifference. For the first few minutes, we spoke about nothing. Work, traffic, how unpredictable the weather had become. The kind of conversation people have when they're afraid of what silence might invite. Then she slowed. Do you ever feel, she said carefully, like you're standing outside your own life, watching yourself play a role you didn't audition for? I glanced at her. Her eyes were fixed ahead, not on me. That was deliberate. Some truths are easier to release when they aren't being watched. Yes, I said, more often than I like to admit. She exhaled, as if relieved by the answer. I used to think something was wrong with me, she continued. That I was ungrateful, that wanting more meant I didn't appreciate what I had. And now, I asked, and now I think wanting more just means I'm still alive. We stopped walking. The streetlight above us flickered, bathing her face in uneven shadows. I saw something there I hadn't before, resolve, mixed with fear. I shouldn't be here, she said quietly. No, I agreed, you shouldn't, but I am, yes. There was no drama in that exchange. No raised voices, just honesty, stripped of ornament. That made it dangerous. I'm not asking you to fix anything, she said quickly, as if sensing a shift. I just needed to breathe. I understand, I replied. And I did, more than she knew. We resumed walking, closer now. Our arms brushed occasionally, no longer pretending to avoid each other. Each accidental touch sent a quiet signal through me, a reminder that restraint was thinning. She stopped again, this time near a small cafe that had already closed. The chairs were stacked, the windows dark. Tell me something real, she said suddenly. Not safe, not polite. I hesitated. This was the moment, the one you feel before it arrives, the one you later trace everything back to. I'm afraid of being the reason someone's life breaks, I said finally. She looked at me then, really looked. And yet you're still here, she said. So are you. She nodded, accepting the truth without flinching. We stood there, facing each other, the space between us charged and fragile. I could see the conflict in her eyes, the careful calculations, the rehearsed justifications unraveling under the weight of feeling. I should go home, she said again. Yes, I said, though my body didn't agree. She took a step back. Then another. Then she stopped. I don't feel seen at home, she said softly. I feel useful, appreciated for what I do. But not known. I swallowed. Being seen can be dangerous. I know, she said. That's why I miss it. She moved closer, closing the distance she'd just created. Close enough that I could smell her shampoo, clean and understated. Close enough that I could feel the heat of her skin without touching it. This is the part where we walk away, I said. Yes, she agreed. Neither of us moved. The kiss, when it happened, wasn't sudden. It was hesitant, almost cautious. A question rather than a statement. Her lips brushed mine lightly, testing, giving me time to refuse. I didn't. The world didn't disappear. There were no fireworks, just a quiet click inside me, like a door closing gently behind us. She pulled back first, breath uneven, eyes searching my face for something, regret, maybe, or reassurance. I'm sorry, she whispered. For what? I asked. For wanting this. I shook my head. Don't apologize for being human. That didn't make it right. But it made it honest. We didn't go any further that night. That's important. Not because restraint redeems what followed, but because it shows how deliberate everything became afterward. She stepped away again, this time with more resolve. I can't do this, she said, voice steady despite the tremor beneath it. Okay, I replied. She turned, walked a few steps, then looked back. Thank you, she said, for not pretending this is nothing. Then she was gone. I stood there long after she left, the echo of that kiss lingering like a bruise you press just to feel it again. I told myself this was the end. That we'd crossed a line and immediately corrected course. I believed it, for exactly 2 days. On the third night, she called. I stared at the screen as it rang, heart pounding, mind racing through all the reasons I shouldn't answer. I answered anyway. I can't sleep, she said without preamble. Me neither, I admitted. Silence stretched between us, intimate and heavy. That kiss, she said finally. It woke something I'd buried. Yes, I said. Me too. I don't want to lie to myself anymore, she whispered. That was the moment I realized this wasn't about attraction alone. This was about recognition, about two people seeing each other too clearly at the wrong time. We need rules, I said, grasping for control. She laughed softly, A sad sound. Rules don't save people like us. She was right, because once desire stops being about the body and starts being about escape, rules become suggestions. And that night, as her voice wrapped around me through the phone, I understood something I hadn't before. We weren't falling, we were choosing, and choice, unlike accident, comes with consequences you can't pretend you didn't see coming. After that call, everything slowed, and accelerated at the same time. Days stretched, nights collapsed into restless fragments. We didn't rush into each other's arms like reckless teenagers, and somehow that restraint made it worse. Desire left unattended doesn't fade, it sharpens. It learns patience. It waits. We didn't see each other for a week. That wasn't a rule we agreed on. It was instinct. A shared pause, as if we both. Instinct. A shared pause, as if we both needed to understand what we had already invited into our lives. During that week, I learned the exact weight of absence. Not missing someone loudly, but quietly, like noticing a familiar sound has stopped and realizing the silence is what hurts. We texted sparingly, short messages, check-ins disguised as courtesy. Busy day, same, hope you're okay, I am, I think. That was as close as we came to honesty. At work, I found myself distracted in ways I hadn't been in years. I'd read the same paragraph repeatedly without absorbing a word. Conversations blurred. I caught myself smiling at my phone, then stiffening immediately, as if someone might see the thought behind it. At night, she occupied my thoughts with an intimacy that felt unfair. I imagined her mundane routines, cooking, folding clothes, sitting beside someone who thought everything was fine. That was the part that unsettled me most. Not the desire, but the parallel lives we were living, intersecting briefly and secretly while the rest of the world carried on unaware. I wondered if she felt the same. The answer came on a Thursday evening. Can we talk? She wrote. Not meet, not see you, just talk. I called her instead of replying. She answered on the second ring. I didn't know if you'd be free, she said. I made myself free, I replied. She was quiet for a moment. I imagined her somewhere familiar, perhaps sitting in her car, perhaps standing near a window, carving out privacy where none truly existed. This is getting harder, she said finally. I know. I keep replaying everything, she continued. Every word, every look, and then I go home and feel like I'm lying without saying anything at all. Guilt surfaced then, thick and unwelcome. Not because I hadn't anticipated it, but because hearing it aloud made it real. I don't want to hurt anyone, she said. Neither do I replied. And yet here we are, I finished. Silence followed, heavy, but not empty. I think we should stop, she said suddenly. The words landed harder than I expected. Not because I disagreed, but because I hadn't prepared myself to hear them. Okay, I said, after a pause. She exhaled shakily. You say that too easily. Would you prefer I argue? I asked gently. No, she said. I needed to hear it was possible. Is it? I asked. Another pause. Longer this time. I don't know, she admitted. That's the problem. 2 days later, she asked to see me. The message came late. No preamble. I need to look at you when we say goodbye. That sentence undid whatever resolve I'd managed to assemble. We met in a quiet cafe outside the city center. Neutral ground, public enough to discourage impulse. She arrived first this time, seated by the window, hands wrapped around a cup she hadn't touched. You look tired, I said as I sat down. So do you, she replied. We studied each other like strangers pretending not to remember everything they knew. This was a mistake, she said, not unkindly. Yes, I agreed, but not an empty one. She smiled faintly. You always do that. Do what? Say the thing that makes it harder to walk away. I'm sorry. She shook her head. Don't be. Just. Don't make this about romance. I can't survive that. It's not, I said truthfully. It's about honesty. She laughed softly, a sound edged with sadness. Honesty is what started this. We talked for over an hour. About nothing and everything. About the lines we'd crossed and the ones we hadn't. About the lives we returned to each night, unchanged on the surface, quietly altered beneath. At some point, She reached across the table and covered my hand with hers. The contact was simple, steady, no urgency, and yet it carried more weight than any kiss. "This has to be the last time," she said. "Yes," I replied. She held my gaze. "Promise me you won't look for me after today." I hesitated. "Only briefly." "I promise," I said. She nodded, satisfied, or resigned. When we stood to leave, she surprised me by leaning in and hugging me. Not tightly, not briefly either, just long enough to register the shape of each other, to acknowledge the loss. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For reminding me I'm still capable of feeling." Then she walked away without looking back. That should have been the end. But endings rarely announce themselves cleanly. Sometimes they unravel slowly, disguised as continuation. 3 weeks passed. No messages. No calls. I kept my promise. Or tried to. I avoided places we might cross paths. I filled my evenings with distractions that didn't quite distract. I told myself this was recovery. Then one night, as I lay half asleep, my phone buzzed. I knew it was her before I looked. I broke my own rule. The message read, "I'm sorry." I stared at the ceiling, heart racing, already aware of what this meant. "You don't have to reply," she added. "I just needed you to know I think about you. More than I should." I sat up, every argument I'd rehearsed evaporating under the weight of that confession. I typed, deleted, typed again. "I think about you too." The reply came instantly. "Can we just be honest tonight? No decisions, no promises." That's how it returned, not with passion, but with permission. We didn't meet that night. We talked, for hours, about fear, about desire, about the quiet rebellion of wanting something for yourself when you've spent years prioritizing everyone else. Somewhere between midnight and dawn, the final illusion fell away. We weren't pretending anymore, and once honesty replaces hesitation, the ground doesn't just shift. It gives way. By the time we hung up, I knew what was coming next. Not because she said it, but because neither of us suggested stopping again. And that silence, the one where resistance should have lived, was louder than any confession we'd made so far. There is a moment, quiet, almost invisible, when you stop pretending you're confused and finally admit you know exactly what you're doing. That moment doesn't come with drama. No thunder, no warning. It arrives gently, like acceptance dressed as calm. For me, it came the morning after that night of honesty. I woke up with her voice still echoing in my head, not saying anything profound, just breathing on the other end of the line as we both pretended sleep might eventually claim us. I remember staring at the ceiling, feeling oddly clear. Not proud, not ashamed, just aware. We had crossed something irreversible, not because of what we'd done, but because of what we no longer denied. We didn't rush into secrecy like criminals. There were no grand plans, no whispered vows, no fantasy of escape. That's the lie people like to tell about stories like this, that they are driven by reckless passion alone. The truth is colder and far more dangerous. We were careful, too careful. We met during hours that belonged to no one. Late mornings, early afternoons, short windows where absence could be explained and questions wouldn't be asked. Neutral spaces at first, cafes, quiet drives, empty parking lots where conversations mattered more than proximity. And yet, even then, the air between us was never innocent. The first time we were alone behind a closed door, neither of us pretended it wasn't coming. There was no rush, no tearing at clothes, no cinematic urgency. Instead, there was a pause, long and deliberate. "This is where we stop if we're going to stop," I said. She looked at me for a long time. I saw fear there, guilt, desire, relief. Then she shook her head. "Not today," she said. That was all. I won't describe what followed in detail. Not because it wasn't intense, but because intensity doesn't need spectacle. What mattered wasn't the physical act, it was the surrender beneath it. The way two people finally allowed themselves to be present without explaining, justifying, or editing themselves. Afterward, she lay beside me in silence, her head resting lightly against my chest, as though listening for something. "This changes nothing," she said quietly. "And everything," I replied. She didn't argue. What followed wasn't a whirlwind. It was a season, a dangerous one. We didn't pretend we were in love. That would have been easier to rationalize. Love has language, rules, social permission. What we had was more fragile and harder to explain, a recognition that bordered on necessity. She never spoke badly of her husband. That's something people always assume. There were no complaints about cruelty or neglect. Only absence. Emotional distance stretched thin over years until it became normal. He's a good man, she told me once, eyes fixed on the road as we drove in silence. That's what makes this unbearable. I understood then that guilt wasn't something she was trying to escape. It was something she carried deliberately, like proof that she still cared. And she wasn't caught. Not once. No suspicious messages discovered. No unexplained absences questioned. Life continued smoothly around the fault line we'd created beneath it. That, too, is something people must understand. The danger isn't always exposure. Sometimes the danger is how easily the lie fits. We ended things not with a fight, but with fatigue. It happened quietly, gradually, fewer messages, longer gaps. The weight of consequence pressing harder with each meeting. Not fear of discovery, fear of becoming something we wouldn't recognize anymore. One afternoon, sitting in my car with the engine off, she said the words neither of us had wanted to say. I don't want this to turn me into someone I can justify, she said. I nodded. Neither do I. We didn't kiss goodbye that day. We hugged, briefly, tightly, like people who understood this wasn't about lack of feeling, but too much of it. This doesn't erase what it meant, she said. No. I agreed. It just defines it. That was the last time I saw her. No dramatic ending. No final message weeks later. She didn't vanish, she simply returned fully to a life that had never stopped claiming her. And me. I carried it. That's the part no one warns you about. Affairs don't always leave wreckage behind you. Sometimes they leave it inside you, quiet, undetectable, shaping how you move through the world afterward. I don't regret her. I regret the part of myself that needed her to feel awake. Because here's the truth, stripped of romance and smoke and late-night honesty. It was never just a shisha outing. It was never just attraction. It was two people meeting at the wrong intersection of timing and vulnerability. Two people who didn't mean to cross lines, but recognized each other the moment they did. She went on with her life. I went on with mine. No exposure, no punishment, no public consequences, just a memory that still surfaces sometimes, uninvited, reminding me that there are moments you can't undo, not because they were mistakes, but because they revealed something you can't unlearn. And if there's one thing I know now, it's this. Smoke hides many things, but it never hides the truth from the people standing inside it. What began as just a shisha outing became a quiet collision of timing, loneliness, and forbidden honesty. No betrayal exposed, no names revealed, no dramatic downfall, just two adults who met at the wrong moment and saw too much of themselves in each other. This wasn't a story about lust alone. It was about being seen when you least expect it. About how silence can be louder than confession. About choices made not in passion, but in vulnerability. They weren't reckless. They weren't careless. And that's what made it dangerous. She was never caught. He never asked for more than she could give. And when it ended, it didn't explode, it lingered. Because some stories don't ruin lives. They change you quietly. If this story stayed with you. If you felt the tension, the restraint, the honesty hiding between the lines. Then you already understand the kind of stories told on this channel. Sparkles for more mature, emotionally charged, and unforgettable stories, stories that don't shout but stay with you. Right finger subscribe now, right finger turn on notifications, right finger and stay close to the smoke, because the next story might feel uncomfortably familiar. Some nights leave a mark you can't erase. Some choices stay with you forever. If this story gripped you, made your heart race, or left you thinking about what could have been, don't miss out on the next one. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and join me for more stories that explore desire, secrecy, and the moments that change everything. You won't want to miss it.